Ivan finds himself reborn as a future barbarian villain. But before the noble hero can find and defeat him, he starts modifying himself into a SSS rank boss demon, which is a level far beyond any human using Magitech. A huge dragon is throwing fire everywhere in Palladia. The MC is a veteran player of this game and knows everything here like the back of his mind. He says today's mission is to slay this adult red dragon and get the highest reward. The dragon immediately sees him and starts attacking, but he also jumps up, preparing his spear. He says the beast, in the name of the Titan gods, will be sent to hell. The dragon throws fire back at him. The fire starts burning him, but he still doesn't stop and keeps moving forward, attacking the monster, which starts roaring loudly. Then the monster throws the main character away, smashing him against a wall on the ground. The main character wakes up again, rises, and says it's still not working. The dragon once again comes toward him with its mouth wide open. The main character says it looks like he failed again and can only log out of the game. He tries his best, but log out is not working. He says he doesn't understand what's going on and why he can't log out. The dragon is still coming straight at him. He starts panicking and says not to tell him the system is glitching at a time like this. The monster is right above his head and about to gobble him up, but suddenly a huge cloud of smoke appears everywhere. Everyone watching says someone is challenging the red dragon. Another person says there's no chance and they are just going to their deaths. Then, within the crowd, the main character appears again, feeling a bit relieved. He thinks next time he will definitely slay that beast and tells it to just wait. He looks at the dragon on the screen, and a bit later he starts walking away from the place. But suddenly a truck says hello. He immediately looks at the truck, but it seems like it's too late. A moment later, he is lying on the ground, thinking if he is dead. A warning appears saying the character is in a bleeding state and needs immediate treatment. Another warning starts to appear. He wonders why this flat electronic voice is showing up again and questions if the game company can't afford a female voice actor. He looks around at the snow everywhere and asks if this is the northern ice field. Then he says he already logged out, so why is he still in Palladia? Then suddenly he feels a headache and starts remembering fragments of the past. He's playing with some kids, and then something horrible happens as a monster arrives. The main character thinks his head hurts and wonders what these memories are and what's going on. He questions who Aryan even is. A young man of a hidden race living in seclusion on the northern ice field. He says the name feels very familiar and thinks it might be a quest NPC from the game. Then he wonders if he has become an NPC in the game. He says to open the system interface, and as it appears, he says he still can't log out. He checks the stats and says there's no mistake with this NPC stats. Right? He notes that the average stats of a Tier 1 professional usually stay around 12. Since the system isn't helping much, he says that aside from hidden classes, such stats can normally only be reached after entering at least Tier 2. He points out that an ordinary young man from a hidden tribe could never possess these numbers and questions what kind of pay-to-win template this is. As he keeps reading, he says the core ability is Reshape the World, and wonders what kind of overpowered attribute that is. The system shows that core Reshape the World is an incompletely manifested special talent, where the owner will forge a body suitable for a certain deity by modifying the proportion of mythological elements within their own body. The status is unlocked. The main character thinks that core means the character holding this talent has the potential to become the team's carry, an absolutely SS-tier rare trait. He recalls briefly obtaining a talent with the same prefix through a challenge quest before. As he continues thinking, he explains that this Reshape the World ability means that whether he chooses a magic class or a physical class, this talent will always be cultivated as a core ability, the descendant of the Starforger. He realizes that's why the name sounded so familiar. This is no ordinary northern barbarian NPC at all. This character is actually the final boss of the highest level 50-player raid after the 4th version update. Then the main character says he wonders if he is that Starforging Titan now, but immediately rejects the idea, saying there's no way. He says he's currently just an injured barbarian kid lost on the ice field. He goes on to say that whether it's the Rise of Nations, the Rebellion of 1,000 Towers, the Bone-Tide Alchemical Ascension, or the Calamity Kin, these major version events are all near-death experiences. He explains that in this turbulent world, only the strong can survive. He says he can't maintain the status quo and must survive, and that he absolutely cannot be taken out like this. As he walks forward, he thinks that it's mid-December, which means the extremely harsh weather northerners call the white tide is approaching. He says he must first survive in this ice field, but suddenly he feels weak and collapses. He says fate made him reincarnate as a boss destined to be defeated, but he refuses to obey fate's arrangements. He declares that he will survive on this ice field and rewrite fate itself. He adds that it is still hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest country, the northern demon kingdom of Elrond. Then he recalls some useful information. He says the good news is that he remembers a hunter's cabin should be somewhere in the surrounding woodlands, where there should be firewood and food supplies for the winter. He plans to first avoid the period when the white tide is at its fiercest, and then hitch a ride with a reliable merchant caravan along the trade route to the central empire of Linda. He continues thinking that, according to the game's plot progression, Linda is the birthplace of many major events. He realizes that as long as he gets there, he can enter the main storyline. He notes that the class route he was most familiar with in his past life, the alchemical knight, is there, an emerging class born after the Magitech alchemical revolution, capable of forging extremely durable armor. Then suddenly he senses something and pauses. He thinks there's movement and wonders if someone is coming. He suddenly starts moving forward, but then collapses onto the ground. He thinks that someone is approaching on horseback. He notes that this place isn't close to any main roads or trade routes, and without a special reason, ordinary people or merchant caravans would never come here. A little ahead, through the misty area, a few people appear riding bird-like horses. There are also others on black horses, aiming their weapons at the rider on the bird-like mount. For now, the main character just watches them and observes carefully. He thinks those black war horses are strange. Despite running at high speeds, there is no visible white mist from their mouths or noses in the freezing air. He realizes that only undead mounts, favored by the nobles of Elrond, would make no sound even while sprinting like that. Then he focuses on the person being targeted and recognizes her. He thinks that this is the Empress of the Demon Kingdom of Elrond, Fratia Goldsmith. Then the main character thinks it seems she hasn't ascended to the throne yet, and her current identity is still just the eldest princess. He realizes that the current time is before the year 1886 of the new calendar, and the world is still in an era of swords and magic similar to the Middle Ages. Based on his experience as a veteran player, he judges that the strength of these three pursuers won't exceed tier 2. He concludes that, in that case, there is only one answer. Since he has already judged their strength, he immediately buries himself in the snow. Nearby, the warriors on horseback talk among themselves. One asks if they should take her alive, while another replies that there's no need. As they aim their weapons at the princess, a hand suddenly bursts out of the snow and grabs one of the horse's legs. One of the warriors reacts in shock, asking what's going on. In the next instant, the main character emerges and knocks them off balance, making them fall. He activates his barbarian berserker state, increasing his strength by 4. A warrior shouts that someone is here. The main character angrily says how dare they attack the chocobo. Frustrated, he charges forward and takes one of them down, recognizing them as those bat bastards from Elrond. The fallen warrior, confused, questions why they can't attack the chocobo. Before he can react further, the other warriors on horseback shout to take him out. They fire arrows, but the main character quickly uses one of their own as a shield. The injured warrior shouts that they are hitting their own people. The main character observes that the damage tolerance of the bloodkin is indeed formidable, noting that even at a low tier, they don't die immediately from internal organ injuries. Meanwhile, the chocobo is struck and begins to collapse, causing the princess to fall along with it. One warrior orders another to go after the princess while he handles the main character. The other agrees and moves toward her. Another warrior confronts the main character, mocking his ally for being controlled so easily by a low-tier barbarian and questioning whether, as a descendant of the nobles of the night, he feels no humiliation. The subordinate stammers that he was just careless for a moment. At that moment, the main character grabs the subordinate and hurls him straight at the warrior in front. Immediately, a notification appears. Blood Drinker, embraced. The main character realizes that it's a tier 2 blood drinker leading a tier 1 embraced. Then he starts punching them, saying it's time to finish them. One of the warriors quickly recovers and comes back to attack, saying he has already experienced the speed of a bloodkin barbarian. The main character stays alert and says the rapier of the bloodkin isn't something he can take lightly. Suddenly, he feels a sharp strike brush against his cheek and admits that was actually a bit dangerous. He immediately grabs the sword with his bare hand and says he wants to see how the warrior will draw it now. Then, as he starts throwing punches, he says it's his turn. The warrior panics as he sees the punch coming straight at him, and it lands hard, knocking him down. The main character thinks it's a good thing his endurance in berserker state is several times stronger than usual. Otherwise, with pain sensation amplified 100 times, it would have been unbearable. After taking him down, he walks forward and mocks them, asking if the nobles of the demon kingdom of Elrond have become this lacking in real combat experience. The princess steps in and tells him not to underestimate Elrond's nobles as she swiftly takes down another enemy. The main character raises his hands slightly, and admits he takes back what he said. Then he casually points out that her chocobo seems to be dying. The princess immediately rushes over, calling out to Filori again and again, but it becomes clear that Filori won't survive. She quietly says to rest in peace to her partner and friend. The main character watches silently. After a moment, the princess turns to him and introduces herself as Fratia Antonia Josephine Goldsmith, adding that he can call her Fra if the name is too long. The main character notices her appearance and thinks there must be a reason she has so many admirers. She suddenly catches him staring and questions what he's looking at. He quickly brushes it off, saying he just remembered something important. He walks over to one of the fallen warriors and starts looting, saying this is all money as he collects valuable items from their bodies. The princess then asks for his name and where he is from. He introduces himself as Ivan Aryan, a northerner. As soon as he says that, the princess reacts in surprise and asks if he is the blessed firstborn. Ivan says he didn't expect her to know the ancient saga language. The princess replies that she doesn't know much, explaining that it is the predecessor of the Marian language and that she learned a little from ancient books in the capital library of Elrond. Ivan then asks who she really is and why those people were hunting her. At the same time, he thinks that he doesn't know much about this part of the storyline and needs to gather more information. The princess introduces herself, saying that he might not believe it, but she is actually the first princess of Elrond. She explains that she was assassinated while on her way to attend the graduation ceremony at the Royal Academy. Ivan questions how she ended up in the northern ice field, pointing out that this place is at least over 100 kilometers away from the nearest border of Elrond. The princess explains that it was because she had to avoid the real trap. She emphasizes that what she escaped from wasn't the main attack, but something far more dangerous, a real trap. Ivan explains that Elrond is known as the Demon Kingdom because its mainstream magical factions mainly deal with curse modifications and even necromancy. Because of this, its ruler is also referred to as the Demon King. They were ostracized by conservative religious factions and forced into a mass migration, eventually arriving in the barren northern lands of the Palladia world. To survive, they began researching ways to defeat monsters, which gradually caused them to evolve from medical warlocks into professions like soul and flesh monks, specializing in curse modifications. Eventually, even more extreme paths emerged, such as necromancers, those who manipulate bones and souls directly. He adds that they developed rituals capable of modifying the human body, known as Elrond's secret rituals. Since then, Elrond has become one of the most bizarre factions in the world, with no one truly knowing what kind of hidden power lies beneath their grotesque and altered forms. He further explains that, unlike the nobles who enjoy privileged advancement routes, most commoners are forced to accept cheap, mass-produced modifications. These turn them into lower-tier demons with fixed professions, like farmers fused with plow oxen or laborers with gorilla-like arms. As he reflects on all this, Ivan thinks about how ironic it is that this seemingly airhead eldest princess, Fratia Goldsmith, will one day lead a glorious revolution to break this rigid class system, even though things won't end well in the end. He then shifts back to the present and asks what she meant by the real trap. The princess turns to him and explains that the assassination attempt at the Royal Academy was only a feint, meant to force her to flee toward the capital. She says the enemy's true main force is likely lying in ambush on the road back to the capital from the academy. Because of this, she and her subordinates split into two groups and took a detour through the northern ice field to circle back. She explains that she assumed even if enemies were stationed along this route, their numbers would be limited, and she believed she could handle them. Then Ivan thinks that it's hard to believe the future Blood Queen, the fourth ruler and the third Demon King of Elrond, actually has such an innocent, maiden-like side. The princess asks if he is still listening. Ivan replies that of course he is. Then he asks if she wants to know who sent those people to assassinate her. She hesitates and asks if that's even something that can be known, or if he already knows. Ivan immediately grabs one of the fallen warriors and asks how many people within Elrond's borders have mastered blood kin modification rituals. The princess replies that, including the Grand Duke Blood Dragon, there are 12 families in total. However, she adds that even though they oppose the Royal Academy enrolling commoners, they wouldn't go as far as assassinating royalty. Ivan points out that she is forgetting another group and kicks one of the bodies. The princess asks who he means. Ivan answers that it's the necromancers, and calls out the man for being very successful at playing dead. At that moment, the corpse opens its eyes. Though silent at first, he realizes there's no point hiding anymore. He stands up and admits he didn't expect to be discovered, then starts laughing maniacally. The princess immediately analyzes him, identifying spell marks, bone manipulation, corpse proxy techniques, and long-distance soul projection. She concludes that within Elrond's necromancy faction, he must be a great wizard of the Hippocratic school. The necromancer acknowledges her insight, addressing Fratia Goldsmith directly. He says that ever since the Mage Holy Land, the City of 1,000 Towers, opened enrollment, she became the first prodigy to graduate as valedictorian purely as an academic mage. He adds that if this operation hadn't received support from a higher power, allowing him to prepare a backup plan, she might have truly escaped. Then he snaps his fingers and says that perhaps they need to see some real monsters. Suddenly, the fallen warriors begin to mutate. Their bodies twist and reanimate, attacking each other before merging together into a single, more powerful creature. The newly formed monster speaks, saying that if it weren't for wanting to share its lord's benevolence with more people, it wouldn't personally want to kill such an outstanding junior like her. The princess is shocked by everything happening, but Ivan tells her not to be afraid and says he'll handle it. He casually turns to the necromancer and apologizes for interrupting, then asks if he has only just reached Tier 4 and hasn't stepped into Tier 5 yet. The necromancer admits that it's true. He says that although he is over half a century old, he was fortunate enough to complete the path of the flaming sword and claim that final laurel. However, he acknowledges that compared to the exalted perfect ones, there is still a gap. Then he asks if Ivan really thinks he can defeat him. Ivan replies that not really, he was just asking casually. Without warning, Ivan turns, grabs Fratia Goldsmith, and says that she seems to have forgotten that barbarians are swift-footed. Then he immediately starts running away, waving back and calling out a mocking goodbye to the necromancer. For a moment, the necromancer is completely stunned. Both he and the monster he created are left speechless, unable to process what just happened. Then, snapping out of it, the necromancer curses and realizes that Ivan somehow knew he hadn't fully completed the stabilization of his skeletal warlords. Enraged, he fuses himself with the monster, creating an even more powerful form, and orders it to chase them. The fused monster charges forward, vowing that the barbarian won't escape. But Ivan keeps running, even laughing, mocking that a mere Tier 4 opponent isn't worthy. Suddenly, several eerie green projectiles are launched toward them. Ivan narrowly dodges them while continuing to run. The necromancer, now suspicious, demands to know who Ivan really is and how he understands spiritual art so well. Ivan simply brushes it off, saying he's just a passing barbarian as he keeps moving forward. Behind them, the fused necromancer monster continues the pursuit and declares that Ivan can take his secrets to the grave. Then the necromancer begins channeling a massive attack, gathering energy for a wide area spell, Finger of Death. As the power builds up and his head starts glowing ominously, the princess recognizes it instantly. Terrified, she shouts that it's the Finger of Death. Then Ivan immediately tells the princess not to move. She reacts, flustered, asking where exactly he's touching and calling him rude. At that exact moment, a massive monster appears right above them. Ivan looks up and starts counting in his head, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, estimating it will reach full charge in 4 seconds. Then he suddenly says it's too slow. He pulls out a lightweight folding crossbow and fires an arrow straight into the monster's eye. The monster explodes mid-air, its shattered remains falling around them. Ivan calmly says it's fine now. The princess, still confused, asks what just happened. In the distance, the necromancer's voice echoes, saying well fought and that he will remember him. Cut to the capital of Elrond, where heavy rain pours over the city. Inside the Demon King's bedchamber in Scorburn Palace, a figure rushes through the corridor and reports that the royal sister's whereabouts are currently unknown. He volunteers to lead the Silver Knights of the Imperial Guard to rescue her. The Demon King refuses, saying that until he takes over the position, the Imperial Guard cannot leave the capital, and he himself cannot either. The man is confused, pointing out that the sister is supposed to inherit the title of Demon King. But the father explains that the situation is too unstable. He could collapse at any moment, and with no news of her, Elrond needs a successor ready immediately. The man accepts this, but as he turns to leave, there is a dark look in his eyes. The Demon King, exhausted, murmurs to himself, wondering where Fratia Goldsmith is. Back at the ice field, a distant explosion fades. Ivan casually remarks that it's already over and jokes that he expected at least a dramatic "I'll be back." The princess looks at him seriously and demands to know who he really is. Ivan replies that he's just a barbarian. She immediately calls him out, saying that's a lie. Real barbarians hate that term and call themselves northerners. She also questions how a barbarian could understand magic so well, especially something as obscure as necromancy. Ivan stops her and says he can give her an exact reason, but she should just think of it as a voice whispering in his ear. She laughs lightly and says that although she doesn't like liars, she'll let him off the hook this time. The princess bows slightly and says that, as the eldest princess, she expresses her deepest gratitude to him for his consecutive acts of help, and that the Goldsmith family will surely repay him. The barbarian is a bit surprised by such a formal response. Ivan suddenly says it's white. The princess immediately reacts, telling him not to look. But Ivan clarifies that he's not talking about her. He's talking about the white behind her. He realizes it's the white tide. Without wasting a second, he grabs Fratia Goldsmith again and starts running as fast as he can. Later, they take shelter in a small cabin. Inside, they light a fire and start cooking some food, sitting close together to stay warm. Ivan asks what she would have done if he hadn't stepped in against those 3 vampires. The princess calmly shows him a necklace. Ivan immediately recognizes it as a gemstone scroll and is surprised. He points out that using something like that against vampires would probably blow them to pieces in the first round. She looks at him curiously and says he seems to know quite a lot. Then she asks him directly if he can figure out why a necromancer would be behind this assassination attempt. Ivan says it's hard to say, but they can analyze the situation. He suggests that if she dies, they should ask who benefits the most. The princess considers it and says it might be her younger brother, Otto. Ivan reacts, mentioning that pink-haired, cross-dressing prince. But Fratia Goldsmith immediately warns him not to be deceived by appearances. She explains that while it might seem like the prince would benefit the most from her death, in reality, that isn't the case. She continues, explaining that even if Otto takes the throne, the conflict between Elrond's commoner reformists and noble conservatives would only intensify. With the Demon King severely ill, if Otto becomes crown prince, the internal struggle would grow even worse. Ivan follows her reasoning, and she finally concludes that the real beneficiary would be the undead faction, a third-party force controlling significant resources. She becomes serious and says she must return to Elrond immediately. Ivan stops her, pointing out that if she steps outside right now, she'll be frozen into an ice sculpture by the white tide within seconds. She insists that she can't just stand by and watch Elrond fall into chaos. Ivan calmly explains that the peak of the white tide won't last more than 3 days, and during that time, the enemy won't act rashly. He adds that her being alive and knowing the truth behind the assassination is the biggest threat to the undead faction's plan. She looks at him and asks what someone like him, who claims to be just an ordinary barbarian, suggests they do. Ivan replies that the first step toward victory is simply making it back to the capital alive. She pauses, slightly surprised, then bows again and says she wants to stop the undead conspiracy. For that, she needs a knight to accompany her. She formally proposes forming a contract with him in the name of the future 43rd Demon King of Elrond. Ivan immediately refuses, saying he has many things to do and cannot stay in Elrond for long. He also reflects that for the Goldsmith royal family, such contracts are absolute. Once formed, they must be followed until death. However, he admits that he also cannot ignore the undead faction's conspiracy. The princess brightens slightly and says she understands. She adds that she cannot promise him land or a title right now, and if he is willing to become her Black Knight, the only thing she can offer as payment is herself. After hearing this, Ivan is so surprised that he nearly chokes, tossing aside whatever he was eating and drinking. He quickly says that's not what he meant. He explains that he has his own mission, and if she really wants to repay him, he hopes she can perform an Elrond secret ritual for him at the right time. In his mind, he wonders if the Grand Princess of Elrond is somehow even more straightforward than he is. Fratia Goldsmith agrees without hesitation. She says it's no problem. As long as the ritual doesn't involve top-level secrets, she can perform it once her mana recovers. She then asks if he has already decided what type of ritual materials will be needed. Ivan stands up and walks a little ahead, saying it's hard to explain with words alone, and that he needs to recall it properly. As he focuses, his hand begins to glow. He activates the core, reshape the world talent, and memories from this body, carrying the residual factors of a titan, start becoming clearer. He silently reassures himself that he won't forget his original mission either, uncovering the truth behind the burned village. The system notifications continue to surface in his mind. The princess, observing this, realizes what he's planning and says that this is a ritual capable of mass-producing individuals close to Tier 3 professionals. Ivan asks if there's a problem, adding that while the materials might not be cheap, they should be obtainable on the black market. The only truly rare component would be dragon blood. The princess looks at him seriously and asks if he truly intends to stop a war, pointing out that something like this wasn't created to prevent one. Ivan calmly replies that power itself has no good or evil, only people do. He adds that the one currently looking at this blueprint is a scholar, not a demon king. She studies him for a moment, then solemnly swears, as a candidate of the Goldsmith bloodline, that without Ivan Arian's permission, she will neither disclose this blueprint nor use it on anyone else. Ivan waves it off, saying there's no need to be so serious. He explains that the nearest city is Flandre, and once the white tide passes in 3 days, they can head there to gather the required materials. 3 days later, they arrive at Flanrel, a famous commercial city in the northern outskirts of Elrond. It is a northern city-state directly under the Demon King's rule and is not governed by the sword-bearing nobles. As they enter, a beast-man shouts for people to make way while carrying goods through the crowded streets. Ivan observes the scene carefully and thinks that these are lower-tier demons, lightly modified by Elrond's secret rituals. He recalls seeing them in the game before, but witnessing them in reality feels completely different. He comes to a quiet realization. It really is a real world, not a dream. The princess tells him they've arrived, and the two step down from the carriage. She notices him staring and asks what he's looking at. Ivan immediately becomes alert and tells her to be careful, warning that there are informants around. He concludes that they've already been discovered.